Star Wars 7x7, episode 2047. Fugitive is episode 3 from season 6 of the Clone Wars, third of a 4-part story arc, and quite the thriller. Clone Wars briefing coming up. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod and this is Star Wars 7x7. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. So Fugitive is the third, as I said at the top, of a 4-part story arc, and we are continuing the investigation of what happened to Clone Trooper Tup. This is a full spoiler Clone Wars briefing, so there's your warning. And now let's get into it. So this all revolves around the tumor, the quote-unquote tumor that was taken out of Tup. It's supposed to go to the Republic for analysis, but Jedi Master, Jedi General Shaak Ti says that it's going to go to the Jedi Temple first. Lama Se, who is the Kaminoan doctor, will... there's more to talk about with the pronunciation stuff, so we'll get to that a little bit later. But Lama Se objects to this because it's supposed to go to the Republic, and Shaak Ti says, nope, my word's final on this. But while they're having this argument, some other funny business is happening in the background because there's a case where the tumor is being kept and another random medical droid comes in and there's a second case and yeah, something not right is happening. And Fives notices this as he's being escorted out. He's supposed to undergo one last physical, and if he passes it, then he's going to be shipped back to the 501st. At least that's what he is told. But by a very lucky coincidence, he happens to be walking through the halls and AZ-3 is going in the other direction. AZ-3 is the droid that helped him with Tup and extracted the tumor. AZ-3 says, oh, that's not what I heard. I heard you're going to be reprogrammed and mind wiped and you're going to be a sanitation worker here going forward. And I'm going to get reprogrammed too. Hey, I hope we remember each other after the reprogramming is done. Obviously, this doesn't go over well with Fives, and he's like, no! And he beats all the escorting clone troopers up, smacks around a couple of Kaminoans. They set the alarm off, and Fives and AZ-3 escape as quickly as possible. And this is where it becomes a thriller, because now you have Fives in fear for his mind, in fear for his life, in fear for the lives of all of his clone trooper brothers. He has to get to the bottom of whatever funny business is going on, and he is the only one who knows that something funny is going on. So I'll spare you all the machinations for how, they have to get around and sneak around and just get you to the details. First of all, they managed to get back to where Fives had been held and where the case with that rotted tissue sample was, and it's still there, which means that Lama Se switched the cases, and so this is more proof that some funny business is going on. So the next step is to actually test that particular tumor thing, cell thing, against the Jango Fett genotype to see if it resembles anything in the original clone basis, And there's nothing about Jango Fett that matches anything with this little cell sample that they took. So that is another kind of red alert situation. At that point, Fives takes what is essentially the ultimate risk, because the surgery to take out that tumor in Tup ultimately led to Tup's death, or potentially led to Tup's death because he died shortly after the thing was removed. But Fives needs to know if he has one of those things inside him as well, and so tells AZ-3 to do the surgery. And it turns out Fives has the same thing, but it's certainly in much better condition than the one inside Tup. And AZ-3 theorizes that, based on his analysis, it looks like this thing must have been implanted at the earliest stage of clone development, possibly in embryos. And so they go off to an embryo facility within Tapoka City, which looks very similar in its way to, if you remember The Matrix, if you saw your first movie, The Matrix, when Morpheus talks about the farms where they're growing all the babies and whatnot, looks very similar to that kind of situation. And they test and find out that at the third stage of embryonic development, all of the clone babies have this implant in them. So it's a shocking revelation for Fives. It's a shocking revelation for us as an audience. And it kind of goes to the question of, everybody talks about what order you should watch the movies in, right? Well, this is a situation where, do you talk about watching Clone Wars episodes before you watch Revenge of the Sith? Because while this is going on, Lama Se also has a conversation with Count Dooku, or Lord Tyrannus as she knows him. And Lord Tyrannus is very concerned about all these developments and says, is Protocol 66 going to get compromised? And Lama Se is like, no, it's not going to get compromised. So already there's a hint at Order 66 as a result of this episode. So if you've seen Revenge of the Sith, that this can't end well. And, I think maybe that contributes to the sense of dread that I feel like welling up in me in these episodes. And it continues to well up in me because ultimately the clones and Shaak Ti managed to find Fives, while Fives has also taken Lama Se hostage because Lama Se showed up, right? And he gets to reveal that he's discovered that this chip has been implanted in all of these clones and is able to present the evidence to Shaak Ti. And Shaak Ti doesn't say she believes him. Like, it's not that I believe you, it's that it's the right thing to do, to send him along with the healthy tumor and the rotted tumor, or whatever the cell is, and all the evidence to Coruscant, and that it's time for Fives to tell Chancellor Palpatine his story, which that should be like, oh gosh, that's gonna be a problem. But Lama Se's explanation for this is that these things were put in at the request of Jedi Master Sifo Dyas to make sure that they wouldn't be as aggressive as Jango Fett, as the original clone host, these inhibitor chips, right? And AZ3 realizes that these things are implants. They are not totally organic material, but it's basically an implant made out of cells. But what its actual purpose is still in question. Lama Se makes this claim, which then, of course, sows doubt in Fives, because it's the Jedi who had these things implanted and were the ones fighting with the Jedi. But his other argument is that, well, if it went awry in Tup, then it's a danger for the entire clone army and for the entire Republic if all of them suddenly have like a mass freak out. And he's absolutely right about that. But even though Fives is told that it was the Jedi that requested these things be implanted in the clones, Fives doesn't react to Shaak Ti that way. Like, he doesn't treat her as the enemy. He treats her as somebody who he still respects and still, treats as part of the chain of command, if you will. So this revelation doesn't necessarily make him turn against the Jedi entirely, but it certainly has the potential to create that kind of difficulty between the clones and the Jedi, which, that's its own problem, to be sure. And I guess we'll see how that's going to end up developing in the final episode of the story arc, where it can't end well if they're going to wrap this up. Something bad is going to happen. It's the only thing that makes sense. And that's it for the briefing for the most part, but there is that whole pronunciation business that I'm going to address after the break. Stay tuned. Hey Rebel Rouser, I've made some changes to the asteroid belt level at patreon.com/SW7X7, and they are all with sponsors in mind. So if you want to get the word out about your business, your product, your service to a dedicated Star Wars audience, then please check out patreon.com/SW7X7 and look for the asteroid belt level for details. Again, that's patreon.com/SW7X7. Welcome back. So in yesterday's episode, I said Kaminoans, and Scorekeeper Declan corrected me and said it's Kaminoans. It turns out we're both right in a way. So this particular episode has an opening where the narrator says Kaminoans, but later on in the episode, Lama Se refers to the clones as Kaminoan property. And so in this case, if we have a Kaminoan saying it's Kaminoan, then I'm going to go with Kaminoan, and I'm going to try and stick with that and knock that into my brain to make sure that I say it right going forward. And that is going to do it for our discussion of pronunciation and for this episode of the show. Thank you so much for joining me for it, as always. And may the Force be with you, wherever in the galaxy you may be.
Star Wars 7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2020 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.